Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaitlyn, and this is all about my story on how I decided to become a single mom by choice. Today, I'm sharing with you all of the juicy details on how I chose my sperm donor. Now, choosing a cryobank and a donor can be extremely overwhelming and a little bit of a taboo topic, but it's important also to remember that everyone's preferences are different, and that's what makes the world goes round. What might be important for me in choosing a donor may be different than what you might want to choose. And that's what's so great about it, is the individuality of it, and you really can select a donor that fits what you're looking for. I had a few criteria that I was looking for. One, I really wanted a bank that had adult photos. That was something that was really important to me. Looks, as shallow as that seems, is also important. It had to be someone that I would be attracted to and maybe considering dating. And that just could be that I'm transitioning out of what I thought was going to be my fairy tale and dating and meeting my husband and having a child with that person and into this journey. I'm not really sure where that came from, but that was one thing that was important to me, is I had to be able to look at them and say I would date them in real life. The other piece that was also important to me was that genetically we were a match, obviously, and family health history was also extremely important. The third thing that I prioritized in my search was their bios. These cryobanks will allow them to either answer questions or write a bio or an essay, and I just needed to be pulled in and drawn in to feel like they were a good person. The fourth thing that was really important to me, and probably was the most important in this process, was an open ID or ID disclosure, meaning that my child, when they turn 18, has the ability to contact the donor if they choose to. I personally don't feel that that is a decision I can make for my child at this point. I want the decision to be theirs. They may turn 18 and not care if they ever meet their donor, or that may be something that's very important to them. I want them to have that choice. So an open ID or ID disclosure donor was probably my top priority, then looks, genetic and health history, and then the bio. There are so many different cryobanks out there to choose from. So one thing that I would recommend, and one thing that I did, was I signed up for a variety of them, so that way I could get more in-depth information on each donor to really make a solid decision. Ultimately, I ended up going with Zytex, which I know can be a little controversial in terms of their family count. I know that there was some litigation in the past, which I believe has been resolved. That is where I just felt the most drawn to the majority of the donors that were available, and I felt the most connection with them. So that is what I ended up choosing to do. One thing that I wanted to do that I wasn't able to was a sperm donor party with some of my closest girlfriends. I really wanted to narrow it down to 3 or 4 donors, and then have a bunch of my girlfriends over and talk through it with them and kind of have a little party to help me pick a donor. But my top choices were selling out so quickly, and I panicked. I don't want to feel rushed in this process. I don't want to feel like I'm settling. So at the end of the day, I just ended up purchasing what my gut was telling me to do. My mom logged onto my account and looked through my favorites and gave me her opinion as well. And she ultimately, really liked my top choices as well. So that made me feel really, really good. One thing that really wasn't a priority to me was their education level. Obviously, I would like someone with some college experience, but having a master's or a PhD wasn't really important to me. And I think mostly because I don't have a master's or a PhD. I have a great career. I've had a very successful career, and I don't feel like that makes me any less desirable or any less likely to have a great kid because I don't have a master's or a PhD. I think some of the education piece as well is all about opportunity. And maybe they did not have the opportunity to go to college, or maybe they decided to go into the military and choose a different path. And everyone has their own unique path in life, and it may not be focused solely on education, and that is okay. Some people do prioritize it because that is a priority to them, and that's great. I think that's awesome if that is something that is important to you. There are certainly donors with excellent degrees and interesting careers and engineers and things like that that are appealing. If that worked out, great, but that wasn't something that I prioritized. The other thing that wasn't really a priority for me when I first started looking was age, which soon turned into be an important factor. Not my top determining factor, but it did play a role in the donor that I ultimately chose. So once I had narrowed it down to 3 or 4 of my top picks, after reading the bios, my top pick actually was a 30-year-old single dad. And originally I was like, they can't have kids, they can't be married, which makes absolutely no sense because the reality is some of these 23-year-old guys that are donors are eventually going to be married and have kids when my child turns 18 and can reach out. So the whole idea of them being married and being a donor and that being weird to me doesn't make any sense, but that was just in my head. So my donor that I actually chose was a 30-year-old single dad, and his bio is really what pulled me in and helped me make that decision. He is a family man. He is hardworking. His dad is his hero. He has a daughter who is his world, and he ultimately went down this path to help others based on friends that he had that had trouble conceiving. So the whole story is really what pulled me in, and I knew that when my child reaches out, there would be a decent human being, or I hope a decent human being on the other end of that call. I also feel like someone who's slightly older and a dad really understands the gravity a little bit more of what they're signing up for with being an open ID donor and what impact that can have on a child later on in life. So when it came down to it, I had 2 that I was choosing from. One was 23 and one was 30 and a dad. So I figured at the end of the day, the dad and 30-year-old is probably more understanding of the entire process of what he's signing up for. One thing I also tried to keep in mind when selecting a donor is with family health history, this is all self-disclosed. So there's no way to prove that their grandfather died at 80 years old from cancer or what maybe caused the cancer. Cancer can be caused by environmental factors as well. And I have a grandfather who died of cancer in his late 70s. So again, that doesn't make me any less likely to have a healthy child. That is just life. Unfortunately, we are all going to die at some point and from a variety of different things. So I kind of took that with a grain of salt. While it was important, it wasn't the end all be all. If I was with a partner, they may have family health history that's not ideal, but it's not going to keep me from having a child with that person. So again, the top things I wanted to focus on is open ID disclosure. Would I potentially be attracted to them and look at dating them in real life? Their bio and how they came across in their writing, if they seemed like a good, genuine, kind person. And then also genetics. Now, I'm still waiting on my genetic results. I should have those this week. And the nice thing about Zytex is if I'm not genetically a match for the donor I chose, I can swap to a different donor one time at no cost. And then ultimately, if I decide to switch donors because of the number of vials that I purchased, I would be able to transfer for only $150 if I ultimately chose a different donor. I don't think I will. I feel really good with my choice. He was not my very first choice. However, my first choice was not in stock. So I kind of put it out there in the universe that I feel really good about the donor I chose. If my first choice comes available before I start my IUIs, which will likely be around May, then I may consider switching. But the more that time goes on, the more confident and the more comfortable I feel with my second choice and feel like it was the right decision. And I think that's the most important piece in this, is you just have to go with your gut. What's important to me might not be important to you, and you might have your own set of priorities, and that is fabulous. But at the end of the day, go with your gut. It's never going to be 100% perfect. Go with your intuition. That is ultimately what I have been relying on to guide me through this whole process. So it has been fun, and it's so relieving to know that that process is over. That was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. But the last thing that I wanted to leave you with that I was not aware of when I started this whole process. If you watch my first video, you'll know that I talked about the grieving process of grieving the fairy tale of the marriage, husband, kid, white picket fence, golden retriever, all of that. And I was grieving that. I thought I had moved on. Making that big purchase of buying 5 vials of sperm. And the reason I bought 5 is because I would like to try 3 to 4 IUIs and then have 1 left over for IVF for a sibling later on in life if I don't meet the right person. So I wanted to have enough to protect my future. But needless to say, each vial was $14.95, so $1,500. That was a $7,500 purchase of sperm. It was my first big purchase in this whole process, aside from testing and things like that. Those were all just preliminary things to tell me this is a possibility. And making that big purchase, knowing that if I changed my mind, I would only get back half of my money. And it just made it very real, which then triggered that grieving process again that I thought I was over. So if that happens to you, know that it is normal. And I think that I will have multiple scenarios where I grieve that process a little bit more. And I think it's an ongoing thing. I don't think it's you grieve it once and you've moved on. I think that as I go through this process and as I take steps forward, the reality of that fairy tale not being what I thought it was is hard, but it doesn't mean that my new journey is not beautiful and is not exciting and is not what was meant for me. And I just keep telling myself that I'm creating my fairy tale. My therapist tells me you can't talk about Mr. Right never coming into your life or that you've lost the fairy tale. Your fairy tale is just different. So keep reminding yourself that you are creating your own fairy tale and this journey is beautiful and you are so fortunate to have this ability to create the family of your dreams. So I hope this helped and I hope it was informative. I know talking about sperm donors is a little bit juicy. I am getting ready to start my egg retrieval process for egg freezing here at the end of February. So I'm looking forward to taking you on that journey with me as well. Hope to see you in my next one. Bye.